I'm Sarah Frerking, for any of you that might not know. This is my friend Lauren Joyner, and she has joined me today to just have a chat about marriage, right? We talk about that kind of a lot as women anyway, like it just naturally comes up because marriage is another one of those topics that is massive, because it's in your face all the time. That sounds really negative, but I mean, it's just something you deal with like every single day. It's your main relationship, exactly. And it is really amazing and really beautiful and really difficult.
Hard?
Yeah, it's really, really hard, and really, really good. And it's a mystery, as Paul says, and I'll read that scripture in just a minute. But because just when you think you have it figured out, life happens, and you realize you don't have it all figured out, and you don't have all the answers. And I think that's the first thing we really wanted to stress, that marriage is wonderful, marriage is hard, and being in process in marriage is very normal. And just because you have seasons of struggle doesn't mean you don't have a healthy relationship. I think really healthy relationships go through really hard times too, and seasons where you might even feel like you're stuck. Yeah, right? Like I'm just find myself to be a little bit stuck right now. But the importance of it, maybe not in our culture today, but to God's heart is really, really huge. It's the most important relationship in our life. And in Ephesians, Paul talks about marriage, and this is exactly actually what he says. And it's in Ephesians 5, and he's talking about wives and husbands and how we're to be with each other. And in verse 31, he says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church." And so he makes this connection here between this mystery that he calls it of marriage, between a man and a woman, two becoming one, but that it mirrors that relationship that Christ has with his church. And so it is so important, and it's something that we should be talking about. We have begun to talk about it more, I feel like, in the church, but in a really transparent,
in a real way.
Real way, where we can sit and talk about the really hard things in a godly marriage. Because just because it's godly, just because two people love Jesus, doesn't mean it's easy, and doesn't mean it's always even what we want to do, or that we even want to put the effort into it. But it's the most important relationship other than the one that we have with our God. And if we want to walk obediently in that love relationship with him, then we have to put that intentionality first with him, in our relationship with him, and then let that overflow into our relationship with our spouse, because that's that next relationship that needs the most time and attention. Do you think that's accurate?
I would agree. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, we're just going to each kind of share with you in a nutshell the story of kind of the road that we've walked in our marriage. And so Lauren, tell us how long you've been married, and then just give us like that little nutshell of what that has looked like for you and Jim. And her husband's name is Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Jim. We have been married 12 years since August. And when we got married, we were not following Christ.
Okay.
And we just both brought a lot of junk. We did not know how to be husband and wife. I was married actually prior to him, and I thought, well, it was him. He was the reason it all failed, right? That's easy. So moving on into our marriage, we found that we were just really struggling being married at all. Everything was my fault, or everything was his fault. And so this led down a really hard road for us for years. 3 to 5 years, we just were really struggling. And about that second year, is when the Lord really got a hold of us. And so we started going to church, and
Did you get saved then, or did you
we
just
were
kind of
already
recommit?
saved.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, we had kind of both. I mean, gone to church and grew up going a little to the church. I mean, he a little more than I did. And so we loved God, you know, we just weren't actively following
Got
him, and we had never been discipled, we had never been taught,
Yeah.
you know, this is what the word says about these things.
Right.
We did not do premarital, any kind of premarital counseling, which I would highly suggest.
Highly.
highly. Because as we started being taught about what the word says, then we realized how inadequately prepared we were for this thing. And so we started learning about our roles as wife and husband and what that looks like. And so, you know, trudging along, we're working through all of these things, and even getting to points where we're like, oh, we're good. We made it. You know?
Yeah.
And then something else happens. And we're like, we are failing so hard. You know?
Yeah.
So we just are constantly growing, though. We're constantly doing that. Even after 12 years, we'll find ourselves feeling like we're doing good, and then out of nowhere, something happens, and we are like, how did we get here?
Right.
You know? But always going back to, okay, God, help us heal our hearts, because we bring all this junk from the past, and so we have these coping mechanisms that are terrible for one another.
Right, they don't mesh. They don't tend to mesh.
No, and what we found even just recently is the enemy's so tricky. Like, so he's whispering into his ear something that, you know, oh, she thinks you're stupid.
Right.
Well, then he's whispering in my ear, he's stupid.
Yeah.
So then he's completed a whole lie because he believes it, and then I believe his lie because that's what we believe.
Right.
So that also, like, being so aware of the enemy's devices in marriage are huge, you know. And so just as we've just recently been digging through some old stuff, it's bringing us together. It's hard stuff.
Yeah.
But it's also, we're walking in a little better unity than we were even a month ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a mystery, and it is really challenging. It brings so much joy, and it's, you know, you have a person, you know, you have your person but you're right. Sometimes you're like, I'm stuck here.
Yeah.
And especially being a Christian woman, you don't want to get divorced. You know what the word says about that. So then you're like, well,
you want to please God. You find yourself in this really hard place because, like, you want to please God, but you don't really want to do the work.
I don't want to do this
because it's hard.
And I don't feel like it.
Exactly.
And I don't feel in love like I did when I walked down the aisle for this man, you know?
Exactly, you know, and I think, you know, you hit on it so good. It's like we bring things to the relationship, like already. Like, you're bringing your issues of your heart. You're bringing anything unresolved and undealt with into the marriage, how you deal, you know, even how each of you saw and dealt with, like, conflict. That's a huge one, right? Because conflict happens in marriage.
Yes.
Like, it just does, because it's just two
with
human
any
beings.
relationship.
It does with just human beings,
That's
right? And it's really messy. And so here comes conflict. And if my husband has learned one way, and he had, and I had learned to deal with conflict the opposite way, and then it's this clash of coping mechanisms, and if there's unresolved hurts and wounds in there, you know, and undealt with issues that cause me to hear, you know, he may say something and I'm hearing what he's not saying.
That's not
and
his
vice
intentions.
versa.
Yes.
Right. And so it's difficult for that reason alone. I remember Scott and I have been married for, I hope he's not watching this. I never know dates, and I never know how long we've been married, and he's just like, honey. I'm like,
hilarious.
sorry, I love you. It just goes by so fast because I'm having so much fun. No, but we will have been married 24 years, I think, in December. If it's 23, he's going to kill me. But I'm pretty sure it's 24. This makes me feel really old. That's twice as long as you've been married. But when I was real young. I was just 20 when we got married. And, but I just wanted to just do it right.
Yeah.
And so I read this book, and it was, If Only, I think it was called If Only She Knew. And then there was the man's book, If Only He Knew. And it was to help you understand the opposite sex and the way they're wired, like before you even step into marriage. Because like you were saying, you didn't have premarital, and premarital is huge. I think we did have some premarital, and we did. I know we did. I don't think we did. We did, but it was.
But even when you do, you're newly
exactly.
Like,
they're talking about all the things that can happen.
I'll never fight
right?
him.
And you're like, no, that'll never happen to us. Because another thing I wanted to mention too is we bring these expectations to the marriage. Like we think, oh, it's just going to be this way, and I can't even imagine. I remember doing premarital counseling with a couple several years ago, probably 5 years ago now, or 6 years. Gosh, it's a long time. But it was so funny because we were on this one specific topic, and we were like, so where do you see that there could be, struggles and issues here? And the woman was like, well, I could see this and this and this. And the dude was just like, I don't see how could that ever be a problem. How could that ever be an issue? And I was like, oh. Yeah. And so I gave him a few examples, and he was like, well, that makes so much sense. I've never thought of it. And the only reason he hadn't thought of it is because he hadn't experienced it. Yeah. And so we come with issues that have nothing to do with the other person.
Doesn't matter who you married.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those issues are still there.
Gonna be there.
You're bringing them to the relationship. Yeah. All of you, the good and the bad, right? And then you come in with these expectations, and so the issues can clash, and the expectations, whoa.
Especially when they're not communicated. You just
exactly.
have them in your head.
You just have it. Shouldn't he know? So these books. So I read this book, If Only She Knew, and it was just this book that helps women understand men. And I read it, and I just thought, oh, that's just so great. If I just if I just learn this stuff, it's just going to be so great. It's just going to be, then he's going to respond, and then I'm going to respond. And what was good that I was trying to do is create this healthy cycle, right? Because we can get in these really unhealthy cycles that we don't know how to stop. And I wanted to start a healthy cycle so that I had read that, if men, typically, not all men are like this, but typically the way men and women are wired is that, men really respond to, women who affirm them, and especially in front of other people, they have these things called egos, and it's not all bad, but when you just brag on them and lift them up, and they feel so respected.
But just like Christ and the church. Yeah. Christ wants to be lifted up.
Yeah. There's
so
that
they're
correlation.
made in their image.
Yeah.
We're all made in His image.
That's
so
right.
to see that marriage side of Christ and the church as well.
Yeah. And so I thought, oh, okay, so if I just do that, and I even saw it one time happen. I purposely thought, ooh, we ran into someone in the grocery store, and I started bragging on my awesome new husband to this person, and he put his arm around me and he pulled me close, and I was like, oh,
it's working.
And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this all the time. But what I didn't realize then was just the motivation of my heart and why I was doing it. Because even though it was a good thing that I wanted a healthy marriage, and that's a good motivation, there was also this thing of, I have to have my needs met. I need this person to meet my needs. And so in order for that to happen, I can do this, check, 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 and all my needs are going to be met. And the reality of that is it is not reality at all. Because no human being can tick all the boxes. No. Right? There was number one expectation. Whoa, he was gonna fall, and he was gonna fall hard, because later, as I learned, that I put all my expectation on him, and trying to desperately, and even you in a needy way that is very unattractive. Yeah. Get everything I needed from him, and he never could have fulfilled that ever. And it's taken 24 years, like, to figure it out. I mean, I hope I now have a little bit more understanding than I did, and I do. But that's because it's been a lot of really hard work. And, we had a lot of difficult things happen in the beginning of the marriage and that's another thing that I wanted to bring out too, is that some of the reason we struggle, we go through seasons, is because circumstances change, and different sets of circumstances bring different sets of issues, right? You're not going to struggle in the same way before you had kids as when you had kids, because they just simply bring a whole new issue of attention. Like all of a sudden you might,
as a mother especially, you're focused on this baby,
exactly.
And then you've been doting all this time to your husband, and then he's like, hello, I'm still here.
Yeah,
it's my baby too.
Exactly, and you're still my wife, right?
Yeah.
And I remember feeling as a new mom, like, no, and how dare you? Like,
time for
I'm made for this, and it was hard.
Yes.
It was really hard. And excuse me, we did kind of, really wobble our way through it. Our kids came after a really serious crisis in our marriage, because, as I had mentioned before, I brought my issues, Scott brought his issues. I was a stuffer, he was a hurler, and so we were just in this really.
Yep. I am a stuffer. I'm quiet. I withdraw.
Yeah.
And he's like, let's fix it. Let's fix it. Let's fix it.
Yeah.
You're freaking
Yeah. Like, this is not how I deal.
I cannot talk like this. So then I just go.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're just here, and
stuffers do that.
Yeah.
You stuff to a certain point, and then you blow.
Explode. Yes.
And I had that too in our marriage, where I would get to a certain point, and I think he would think I would blow, and I don't know what he thought. He probably thought I was psychotic.
Crazy. Yeah, I know what. I'm sure my husband was like, she needs help.
But we came to a point after about 7 years where it was over. It was over. We had been so unhealthy in our relationship. We had not dealt with not only had we not dealt with the issues we brought, we never dealt with the issues that came because of that baggage. And then when we nearly divorced, God saved the day in just that he changed our circumstances, really to get me, because I was the one that was in rebellion and saying I'm done, to a place where I could be ministered to, and where the Holy Spirit could bring revelation that the marriage wasn't really the issue. The issue was my heart. The issue was Scott's heart. And would you say that? Absolutely.
The same. And you actually made it further than we did. 7 years was not, we were at maybe year 2.
Okay.
And
those first 2 years are super hard.
Yes, and not only were they hard, we had a new baby. We also moved across the country. I had never been away from my family, so we moved from Georgia or North Carolina to Texas, which it was like in the middle of summer on top of that. And I just wanted to go home, and I didn't want to do this with him, and he wasn't trying, and I wasn't trying, and so I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I mean, I served him with divorce papers, and I was leaving.
Wow.
And that's when God really got a hold of Jim and started dealing with him.
Right. I would say that was similar, because I didn't serve divorce papers, but that's where my heart was.
Yeah.
I told him I'm done and I want a divorce. And then that's when God really got a hold of Scott, and he pursued me. And that's all what I'd always really wanted. Yeah. But then I was mad, because it's like, I always wanted it, and then you wouldn't, so it's too late, dude. But then when God changed our circumstances and rescued us out of this, where we were, then there was an opportunity to be ministered to, and I recognized that there were so many things in here. I always saw him as the problem, and I think that's a thing in marriage that's really, if we would just be willing to look at our own heart.
Change our own, stop looking at their problems.
Exactly, because if you're just focused on them, it just
magnifies all their problems.
It does.
Your mind towards them is negative.
Yeah, and then it's just like so many people, that's just it. It's like, well, this is just too hard, so we're out. And I don't say that if you're watching and you've been in a failed marriage, there is no shame and there is no condemnation for you. The Bible is so clear about our past, and when we repent that we are forgiven and we move on, right? So there's no shame in it. But what a beautiful thing when we can lay aside what we want, maybe based on our feelings and our emotions, and actually sacrifice that and say, okay, but Lord, what would you have?
Because what he has for you is so much better.
Yeah.
Even though we think,
Right.
this is so much better, it looks so much better, it feels so much better, this is what we're going to do, this looks easier.
Right.
I'm sure this is what I'm supposed to
And
be
in
doing.
the moment, it is easier.
Yeah,
That's the
it's
thing. In the
easier.
moment, it is
Mhm.
easier because to deal with your own stuff when you're really mad at another person, that's not easy.
No.
That's really hard. That's what's
Marriage
the word?
is
Not
the
self-sacrificing,
most
but
selfless.
selfless.
I tell everyone
yeah.
that.
And
This
that's
is
not
the
easy.
most selfless relationship you will ever be in.
Yeah.
Marriage. Because your children, you love because they're from your body. Although they can be
Yeah, that's true.
very irritating at sometimes, you know, just like your marriage relationship can
Right,
be.
right.
It's still your child.
Right.
But this is another just random human that you've chose to spend the rest of your life with.
In a covenant.
In a covenant, which is something I was unaware of. And that's actually why I ended up even staying with Jim, is because I learned within this period of me separating from him
Right.
that not only had I made a covenant with him, I made a covenant with God. And I was
Right.
like, well, that changes things.
yeah.
Darn.
Yep.
Because I loved God. Like, my
Yeah.
heart was for him and I wanted everything he had for me, except for this.
Right.
You know?
And that's where you come to that choice, and I think I came to that choice too. It was like the fear of the Lord. Do I really want to
That's
go
right.
do my own thing and see what that's going to be like?
Because I've seen what my choices look like.
Yeah, and they're
And
hard.
they're not good.
They're not great. So I'm going to go ahead and have some faith here
Yeah.
and trust you with my heart, because I didn't want to stay in the marriage, but I did it because, like you said, you did it because you realized
He
this was a
calling me
covenant.
to this.
Yes, you were to remain in the covenant. I knew that I didn't have a right, I didn't have any biblical ground to
Right.
stand on to leave this marriage, and that if I would just trust my God, that He would be faithful and He would reveal things to us.
And ironically, Jim had biblical reason to walk away from me.
Yeah, so did Scott.
And he instead pursued,
Yeah.
just like Scott did.
And as I saw Scott pursuing me, but then what really changed me is seeing him pursue God even if
Yes.
I decided to leave. He
Yes.
was like, I want healing no matter what, because we both began to realize as we got into some counseling, because I decided to stay in it for a few weeks just to get some counseling. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna stay in it for a few weeks and see, you know, just so that I can say that I
That I
tried.
tried.
And so, but within that few weeks, we began to see,
Jim and
that,
I had the same agreement. I said, okay, I'll do these classes with you, and
Yeah.
then I'm done.
yeah,
Then I'm out.
I'm out. Yeah, we have
First
such a
class,
similar
I know.
story.
First class, I learned about this covenant, and I'm like,
Oh, darn it.
This is so lame.
Yeah. And I had to choose, right? I
That's
had
right.
to choose
That's when you have a choice.
what I want
Mhm.
based on my unresolved issues and my emotions and my feelings and what I thought was good, or what God would want and wait and see what He would do. And we both chose that regardless of the marriage, what we saw was that there were issues that had nothing to do with each other. And as we individually walked out that those issues just between us and the Lord, that
Finding healing in that. It's that
Yes.
that triangle, right? As
Yeah.
both of you start going to the Lord,
Yes.
you then meet each other there.
because we begin to see the truth about who God was, the truth about who we were and our identities, and that changes how you see the other person.
That's right. The truth about who they are.
Yes.
Yes.
And you do have to put in the work to deal with those things, but it's so worth it. It doesn't make your marriage perfect, but it changes
It gives you hope. You're not hopeless, stuck in a marriage. You're growing together.
it's life-giving for
Yes,
both of you. It's
that's right.
full of life. You can have a marriage that can be so hard sometimes, but when Christ is the center and the focus is, okay, keeping my heart right with the Lord, and my motivation to do and for this other person is not to get what I want, but for their benefit.
Yes.
That was the thing that I've
Huge.
been learning in the last 5 years is like, if I don't want it for His heart, then that's selfish and wrong, and I'm off. And so when I sense that, I just keep going back to the Lord. And I think that's really the key here, is that you have to
Yes.
just keep turning your attention, because there is nothing you can do to make Jim be who you want him to be. There is nothing I can do to make my husband be who I want him to be. The only thing I'm responsible for is my love relationship with the Lord, how I respond to him, and then letting him show me how to respond.
Yes.
Even if the other person is not on the same page,
No.
on their path to God, on their pursuit of God, in their pursuit of healing, even if they are not. There can be a level of freedom you have in your marriage as you submit your heart, because that's all you can do. And you might be sitting there thinking, well, that just sounds really hard and really long and drawn out. And I'm just going to be honest with you. It can be, but at the same time,
you grow in it constantly.
Yes.
It's not like you're just in this place, and even though you try and you're working and you're working on you. Yeah, it is hard, and it does hurt, and it will bring up past stuff, and that's tough. That's tough for you. It's tough for him. It's tough for both of you.
Yeah.
But you see how much you grow as a person and
Absolutely.
in Christ. You're like,
right.
I
And
didn't
I'm so
respond that
grateful.
way. Oh, look at me.
That was a really good response. And as your responses change,
They feel cared and they feel loved for as well.
and then their responses change.
Yes.
And then you get into that healthy cycle that we were talking about, but that's not motivated by give me what I want.
No.
It's motivated by I love God, therefore I'm going to respond for your sake. And then they begin to respond for my sake, and then I respond for, with,
Even that, we get to pray for their hearts.
yeah.
And even when they're in that ugly place and we're still searching, we get to pray for those things that we see
Right.
are not lining up with God. Not those things that we see that irritate us.
Right.
But those things that God says, this doesn't line up with my word. We get to bring him to the Father.
Right.
And then he begins to change our heart for
Yes.
that changes our heart. even.
Yes, it changes our heart as we pray for them. They begin to change, and we see, and I think this is so important. I know it's especially important for me to see that, oh, you didn't need me to nag.
Yeah.
You didn't need me to panic. You didn't need me to freak out. You didn't need me to
Shut down. Or,
yes. You just want me to just love you, and out of that, love him, and knowing that when it's hard, he'll help me.
Yeah.
He'll help us when it's difficult, because it is, no matter how wonderful
matter
the
how
person is
wonderful.
that you're married to.
Yeah.
People just are not always easy to
Yeah,
love.
we have life. Circumstances and
Yeah.
stress happens.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, babies. I mean, moving,
Yeah.
new jobs,
Yes.
all kinds of
All
just
kinds of things.
mess that we all deal with, that you end up either walking through with your person or taking it out on them.
Right. And even things that are heartbreaking that don't have anything to do with your relationship. That would say in the last year, that's been something really, well, over a year. Gosh, a year and a half. Man, time goes by so fast and so slow. But in the last year and a half, we've walked through some really heartbreaking things. And it's really interesting how it can bring you together, but also make you struggle. It's
Yes.
like, so just being
Builds a
aware of that.
camaraderie almost. Like
Yeah,
we're struggling together and not
exactly.
against each other.
Right. Struggling together, but then realizing in the struggle, the enemy
Well,
wants to come. And so just being spiritually aware and just consciously and continuously putting your relationship, your spouse, before the Lord, releasing them to him, not trying to be the one to fix everything, and just submitting that and caring for that person because it's what God would have you do and for their sake. And it's, it's not always easy, but God is faithful. God is faithful.
Yes.
He's been faithful in your marriage as hard as it has been. He's been faithful in my marriage, and he'll continue to be as long as we just continue to submit.
seek him and,
And submitting is a lot easier when you are in a love relationship with him. And that's really the foundation and the key of it all, as I've said so many times in Living Connected. But
Yeah,
that's
it
why
is.
we call this Living Connected. It's about this connection
That's
that affects these
All the other
connections, all the
ones.
other
Yeah.
connections. So we're out of time, but we could go on and on. But
Yes.
Lauren, thank you so much
Thank you
for
for having
hanging
me.
out with me. Thank you all for joining us and hanging. And this is it for a while. But thank you for tuning in. Remember to keep up with us on our Living Connected Instagram page. You can DM us. We'll be sharing short things now and then on there for encouragement. So don't forget us. We will be back in another season to talk about more topics. So we love y'all, and we will see you later.